All right, welcome back, internet friends, to Love Hate Relationship, an opinionated podcast for opinionated people. I'm Andy Boel.
And I'm Alex Ruiz, and we're here to brighten your day, anger your soul, and tell you how to live your life. In that order.
How you doing today, Alex?
I'm good, it's weird. I'm like by myself this weekend. My wife is off visiting her sisters, and so I have the apartment to myself, which, some people would use an opportunity like that to go out, party, do some, I don't know, get ratchet in some capacity. I bought and ate an entire Little Caesars cheese pizza.
There you go.
Ate that in one go and watched a whole shitload of Key and Peele. So that's where I am right now.
You're living your best life.
Yeah, I'm bacheloring it up. But
nice.
Yeah, it's that, and I did a bunch of laundry. That's my life right now.
Very important. Constant struggle.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. We saw each other this past weekend, you and I did.
We did. It was wonderful.
Yes, I got to meet your gorgeous snakes, Gomez and Morticia, and you showed me a bunch of disturbing YouTube videos involving white people discussing the use of the N-word and Chris Brown.
Yep.
So, all in all, it was a delightful experience.
A horrible entertainment choice all around.
I mean, I had fun.
I'm
How
glad.
are you doing?
I'm doing really well, man. I'm binging all of Westworld right now to try and beat the fact that season 2 starts tomorrow night, and a bunch of friends want to get together and do a watch party. So. Oof. I'm very much enjoying that.
Everyone tells me how good Westworld is, and I'm not against watching it, but I kind of am having deja vu to Game of Thrones, which is just everyone's on board with it, and I'm kind of just trying to create the buy-in for the amount of emotional energy a show like that seems to take.
Sure. It is the first show in a while that has me actively just screaming, "What?" at the TV, so that's enjoyable. I would equate it more to the Battlestar Galactica reboot that came out a decade ago at this point. But it's really good high concept sci-fi, so I enjoy it a lot.
Cool. I was never a Battlestar Galactica person, but I think I remember the conceit of Westworld. Like when Westworld was explained to me, I immediately thought of the Simpsons Itchy and Scratchy Land episode.
Yes.
Which I think the two kind of share some source material. I think I was told that somewhere. Like the Simpsons are making fun of the same book that Westworld is based off of. I think I read that someplace or other. And...
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. Because Westworld itself is an old John Crichton book, and it's basically Jurassic Park, only the dinosaurs are robot cowboys, and everything else goes on exactly the same. And
wait, John Crichton? You mean Michael Crichton?
Michael Crichton, yes. I'm sorry, Michael Crichton.
Okay. John Crichton sounds like an accountant somewhere.
I think John Crichton is the main character of Farscape. So I'm all I'm all mixed up with my sci-fi TV references right now.
Oh, you know what they say, like white people all look the same to me, so it makes sense that their names would all be the same too. Like,
right?
I kid the whites.
Speaking of white people, I'm gonna shoehorn us into our topic today, or at least my topic, my love for today. I'm going to talk about the whitest sport known to man, which
Golf.
is hockey.
Hockey.
Specifically ice hockey, because there are different flavors. Specifically ice hockey. This past week, the National Hockey League playoffs started. I don't know if we said this before in a recording episode or not, but hockey is my sport. It is the one team sport I pretty much care about at all. And so this is an exciting time for me to go cheer on the teams I like and hope that the teams I hate lose horribly. And it felt right to talk about that this week.
Nice. I do feel the need to preface to anyone listening, because I think this is going to probably come out several weeks, if not a month or so after we actually record this, based on the timeline we've been discussing. So that game that you were talking about has occurred in the past to the people listening, but is occurring right now for us in recorded time land.
Yes. For all we know, the Stanley Cup Finals might be going on by the time this actually airs, but
Okay.
I don't think that'll matter too much to the context of what we're saying. But good to preface.
Sure. Okay, so hockey. Talk to me. Talk to me about hockey.
Okay.
Listen, all that I know about hockey can pretty much be like summed up in the three Mighty Ducks movies, which I watched tons of as a kid, and the trailer for the Miracle on Ice movie, which I didn't watch, but I remember the trailers and going, well, that looks like Chariots of Fire for hockey.
That trailer single-handedly brought Aerosmith to a whole generation of kids who just didn't know what it was before, so doing the Lord's work there.
Okay.
All right, so
hockey.
So hockey, just the briefest of explanations for anybody who's not familiar with the sport. That'll probably be most of our listening audience. The sport itself, in its current format, is over 100 years old. Hockey, as we know it, was invented in 1875, and the National Hockey League, which is the big hockey league in America, was founded in 1917. So they actually just had their centennial season last year. It's very popular in all of the colder countries. No surprises there. Obviously, the places where lakes freeze over are the places where people like to go out and whack each other with sticks on them.
Which is why the Mighty Ducks movies took place in Minnesota. Go on.
Absolutely. It's the national sport of Canada. It's my personal favorite event of the Winter Olympics every year is to watch the hockey tournament that they do there. And yet, all of that aside, it is the least popular of the big four team sports. So baseball, basketball, football, and then you have hockey. And I think that goes into, like I said, it's popular in the places where lakes freeze over and such and it gets cold, but that portion of the world is a fourth, a third, maybe. I've heard people make the comparison that soccer is so popular and accessible because all you need is a ball and you can play it anywhere, and that's absolutely true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hockey is not like that. You need sticks, you need skates, you need it to be cold out. So that just sort of creates a inherent popularity problem.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, so you mentioned soccer. So the context where I would approach that question is I think about so my father grew up in rural Colombia, and his big three sports, he was an athlete growing up, and his big three sports were soccer, basketball, and volleyball. All sports where if you have a ball, you can make whatever else you need. You want to play basketball, you stack up some boxes and put a basket on top of them. You want to play soccer, you put a couple trash cans on either end of a field, or some sticks. You want to play volleyball, some sticks, and tie a rope across them. Poor people can play those sports pretty easily. So also it's fair to say he was in a tropical climate, so wasn't a whole lot of ice freezing over and such. And if you're not in a place where lakes are freezing over, you need expensively maintained hockey rinks, right?
Right. There's very little Cool Runnings type shenanigans going on in the world where you're getting the Ecuadorian hockey team to go make a name for itself out there. Funny enough, there is one of those expensively maintained ice hockey rinks across from my apartment complex. Right, ironic.
Well, you live in Maitland, Florida,
That's true.
Which is interesting because Maitland's not a poor area, it's not a rich area. It's not far from some rich areas, and it's not far from some poor areas. So that's interesting.
I don't want to start talking about hockey without pointing out what I see are the inherent flaws, and the popularity, accessibility is the biggest one of those. But what I wanted to do today was kind of make the case for my love of the sport and kind of delve into why I love it, and delve into why, if you and I, who really don't follow any other sports, can do this, delve into why I don't care so much for other ones like basketball and baseball and all that.
I love it. So why do you personally, Andrew Richard Boel, why do you give a shit about hockey? Like,
I give a shit about hockey really because it's unlike anything else. I grew up in a household where my dad was watching pretty much everything. When it was football season, he'd watch football. When it was baseball season, he'd watch baseball. And when it was hockey season, he'd watch hockey. So I had equal amounts of exposure to all of these sports growing up. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's what I watched as a kid, and that kind of nurtured a deep-seated love in it for me. To be perfectly honest, between the ages of maybe 10 and 16, I didn't give a shit about hockey or any sport at all. And then just something kind of clicked, seeing it in the background of my of the house I grew up in around the time I was 16, 17, and this fanaticism and obsession that I have for it really started there. Hockey is unlike any other sport, obviously, because it is played on ice. It is a lot more fast-paced due to the skating, and you can make the argument that any sport is unlike any other sport, but everything else takes place outside on grass, and in my opinion is a little more slower paced. And especially the thing that you want to tell to anybody who hasn't seen a hockey game and maybe doesn't care, it's not a sport that translates terribly well to television. If you just put it on when you've never seen it before, whatever, it's something that somebody else is watching in the same room as you. Going to a hockey game and being in that environment and being in that powder keg of excitement and emotion is truly unlike anything else. I've been to live football games. I've been to live baseball games. I've been to live basketball games. I haven't been to a live soccer game, so I won't sit here and talk about an experience I don't have. But going to a hockey game, seeing a fight, seeing two guys pound the crap out of each other, this is a big part of it. The fighting is awesome.
I was going to ask about that, but please continue.
Seeing a fight, seeing somebody score, seeing somebody make on a breakaway, and seeing the crowd go wild, it really sucks you up and it takes you in to this emotional place that it doesn't really exist anywhere else.
Anywhere else other than like spectator sports, or anywhere else other than hockey?
I would make the case of anywhere else other than hockey. Like I said, soccer is kind of a blind spot for me, and the only comparison I can maybe make is, I've seen the FIFA World Cup. I've seen the city of New York shut down over this tournament. I've seen everyone's seen, the pictures of people in Brazil just losing their minds. I imagine a soccer match is close in the just pure electric fervor of watching a team score, but hockey has just something different to it, something personally that I think is unique. And so let's go ahead and get into it. The biggest thing it does really have is the fighting. Like, the thing that makes hockey unique is it is a heavy contact sport, and I would dare say more so than football.
Sure.
Football, tackling, you can have a man built like a refrigerator slamming into another man built like a refrigerator, and there is a gladiatorial, cathartic awesomeness to that. But hockey takes all of that and dials it up to 11. You have people slamming into each other going 40 miles an hour. You have dudes, this isn't necessarily encouraged or allowed, but you have dudes breaking sticks over each other's arms and legs and tripping each other. And hockey is the only sport where it is not only allowed, but it is somewhat slightly encouraged for two players to just start beating the crap out of each other with their fists and start bare knuckle boxing.
Okay, so I was going to ask about that because I know that obviously basketball has fouling, obviously soccer has fouling, yellow cards, red cards, etc. I think there's an unnecessary roughness call in football.
There is.
Yeah. So all of these sports, even ones like football, which are necessarily contact sports, and in soccer there are techniques where you slide somebody out, you trip them. Obviously, you don't try to like hit somebody, but there is a level of acceptable, understood contact in soccer. In hockey, and again, I'm taking all of this information from 3 movies and a commercial.
Sure.
But I know there's a penalty box. I know because they put the Bash Brothers in them when they fight too much or get too aggressive. Obviously, that's a movie. It's meant to entertain to a certain degree. But if there is a penalty box, if there is the idea that, and people get put in the penalty box for a certain amount of violence, like what's codified in the rules, what's considered acceptable, what's considered excessive?
So they've actually, they being the NHL and the International Hockey Federation and the people who decide these sort of things have sort of gone to great lengths to answer those exact questions, but at the end of the day, it's kind of
up to the refs.
Yeah, it's there's no real continuity, and it's kind of make it up as they go. I do want to point out the hockey league, hockey as a sport itself has gotten a lot less violent since the 70s when absolutely.
Okay.
The 70s, that's when stuff like Slapshot, which has the Hanson brothers, who are 3 thugs that can't do anything other than fight. You had the...
Okay, so you say Hanson brothers, and I immediately am just like, bop, da ba doo bop, doo ba da ba.
Because we are millennials.
Sorry. Yes, well, please continue. The Hanson brothers, who I'm just going to picture as like giant behemoth alternate universe versions of the band Hanson. Continue.
That's actually not far off. I'm going to send you a picture, and you're going to be like, oh my god.
Oh, that's horrifying.
But to my point, the 70s, you had people were making movies, and the movies were all about the fighting. And you had the 1977-78 Philadelphia Flyers, who were called the Broad Street Bullies because they literally just pummeled their opponents into submission. There is a penalty box, and there are extensive rules, and there's a lot of stuff that isn't allowed. But at the end of the day, short of taking your stick and trying to break it over somebody's head, which a player famously did and wound up being sued for assault with a deadly weapon.
Okay.
Short of trying to literally murder someone, everything is accepted to a degree. We're going to slap you on the wrist. We're going to get you out of the game for 10 games. And then when you come back, be sure you don't try to take off Johnny Woodchuck's head. Oh god, he took off Johnny Woodchuck's head. Whoever could have seen this. And that is a problematic element as much as it is the entertaining element.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's gotten a lot less violent over the years as concussion science has gotten better and people are still trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But we as a people have figured out enough that maybe it's not the best idea to be slamming into somebody's head going 30 miles an hour or punching someone 10 times in a month for, 6 months out of the year.
Yeah.
But there is still the excitement. It's still the roughest sport. It is still rough and tumble, and people still tend to get excited in the moment when, somebody hits somebody from behind, and as long as the guy isn't like visibly unconscious on the ice and everyone from the bench jumps up and you get a 10-person fight out on the ice, that's still pretty awesome. That's still pretty enjoyed and accepted.
Okay. So, the fighting is definitely part of the culture.
It's part of the culture. It's probably, to look at it objectively, it's a part of the culture that needs to get out. And hockey itself needs to find a appeal outside of the sport where you might watch somebody bleed.
Yeah.
And I can admit that.
And I think about, like, there's a stereotype of NASCAR fans. And I know NASCAR fans. Some NASCAR fans are very dear people in my life. And there's a stereotype about them that they're just in it for the crashes. This is the day of Simpsons references, but sure. I remember, like, the one where they were watching some kind of race and somebody gets in a crash and a helmet flies off and Cletus catches it and he's like, I caught a head! Oh, it's been scooped out! And he just throws it behind him.
Right.
Like, and the thing is, that's a stereotype of NASCAR drivers. But, like, I know NASCAR fans. Most of them don't think about that. Most of them are invested in the personalities of their favorite drivers. They really understand the complexities of the actual machines involved in this, how difficult it is to race. There is a strategy to it. I'm sure there's a strategy to hockey beyond just beat the shit out of this guy or this guy. Let me ask you a hypothetical. If you saw a hockey game that had very, very minimal fighting, but really impressive strategic moves, like just really impressive plays, kind of more akin to what people would expect from a soccer game, or I'll even cut the difference and say like a rugby game. Rugby is a very rough sport, but there isn't out and out brawling in it. It's just very high contact. But kind of, if you saw a really well executed game with very minimal fighting, would that be less enjoyable to you as a fan?
No, it absolutely wouldn't be. Your question has kind of saved me here. I led us down a path and made a core argument that as we were breaking it down, I really didn't agree with. I don't want to say that fighting is the best thing of hockey so much as I want to say it's something hockey had that was unique.
Yeah. You know, people talk about football, how in the old days of football, before all the helmets and the equipment, it was a less interesting sport, but also, you know, it was safer, but it was also more strategic. Same thing with boxing and the gloves. You know, the reason a lot of boxers have the issues they have is because the gloves are actually too friggin' big and they cushion the blows too much, so people aren't holding back. They don't have to worry about hurting their hands.
Right.
So if you actually minimize the safety equipment there, it would change the way boxing happens. It would change the way football happens, because you'd have to be more strategic. You'd have to set your plays and your playing up so that you wouldn't hurt your own players. But, you know, people also say, oh, it's less exciting because there's less bashing around, and it becomes less violent as it becomes more strategic. And there are people who argue that it won't be watched if you do that. There's people who argue it will, though. So
sure, and I can see the argument on both sides. I personally do agree with the skill over violence aspect, although, and I'm sure we'll get into this in one of these episodes or not, there is this undercurrent of a gladiatorial bloodlust that people tend to enjoy. It's the reason why the violence in hockey made it so popular. It's the reason why, you know, it's part of the reason why football is so popular. We like watching other people damage themselves. But I don't want to get too much into that. I want to save that for a later episode. I do want to try to re-rally my argument and talk about the other thing that I like about hockey. You like I said, you saved me here and gave me a segue to talk about the skill. Something that is just awesome and enjoyable is the skill on display with the sport. These athletes are strapping knives to their feet and skating around for an hour and batting something that is the size of a crushed beer can around the ice on a stick. And that is, it takes a level of skill, it takes a level of finesse, and when you see a truly skilled player do something awesome, it is spectacular, and it is noteworthy, and it is something to start screaming and jumping up and down for, and it's really cool.
Yeah. No, that makes tons of sense. I mean, so obviously, well, not obviously, we talked a lot in our practice episodes, and I'm sure it will come up plenty in future episodes. But I follow a lot of weightlifters and powerlifters, and that's my sport. That's the thing that I care about. But one thing that a lot of carryover happens there is you'll see athletes of other sports training. So you'll see what football players are doing, because a lot of them are being trained by the same kind of coaches,
Yeah.
the same people online who I'm following. Hockey players are a fascinating creature because, much like football players, they need to be horrendously explosive, really powerful, but also huge.
That is actually a misconception.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
so
tell me more.
they do need to be explosively powerful, but the thing of it now, it's sort of becoming more of a runner swimmer build is the ideal hockey build. You need to be compact and sinewy, and being huge helps, especially for an intimidation factor, especially from a, oh my god, I don't want to get checked by that guy, he's 7 feet tall factor. But the most important thing is having your thighs and your legs be pretty much action-packed, lowering your BMI so that you are lean and lithe and pretty much nothing but muscle, and then going to the races and going 0 to 60 in that regard.
That is fascinating. Okay, so that's something I did not know. You just corrected a misconception that I had because, and this is probably self-selection, but most of the coaches I follow online and on Instagram who are training hockey players are showing me behemoth men, which is probably marketing. Like, since you're saying that to me, I'm sitting here going like, you know what? It makes sense that they're going to showcase, because these are strength and conditioning coaches. They're going to showcase,
Right.
their most quote unquote impressive looking clients. And for the hockey players, I mean, if you see someone of like a swimmer's body and you tell someone, oh yeah, he's a hockey player, the first image that pops in your head is, oh, this person's going to have to slam into someone who's 320 pounds and barreling down at like highway speeds.
Right.
It doesn't look as impressive.
No, and it's this whole aggression culture that the sport has been in for so long. The sport is finally starting to get out of, he needs to be 6'3" or taller or else he can't play. Some of the most talented, electrifying, fast, agile players are these little dudes that are like 5'7", 5'8", and it's the David and Goliath type thing where they can get around the 6'6" monster and skate around him and use their speed to do some really cool stuff.
That sounds really cool. I mean, that makes me think of like Muggsy Bogues back in the 90s
Right.
playing basketball, and he's this tiny little dude, but he's just faster and has better cardio and accuracy than everyone else out there, and everyone else out there is the height of their profession. So
That's very much what it is.
Yeah, as a 5'6" athlete, like I find that very gratifying. But no, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I did not know that. I was still, I don't know how you get past that stereotyping of the sport to anyone outside of it. And
it is
Yeah,
an issue. It's definitely an issue. I was just sitting here thinking about how, I'm probably not going to convince any listener to go out and watch a hockey game on TV based on this podcast. And it really boils down to, it's something you need to see, because the league is evolving, the league itself is adapting and learning to show off these more interesting things, and the biggest way to create a hockey fan is to convince them to give it a shot in a live setting, because that's when it gets awesome.
And it's funny because like I went to one hockey game when I was a kid. I remember this. My mother got some Solar Bears tickets when I was probably 10, maybe. My mom got some tickets from work. She like won them in a raffle, or a friend gave them to her. I don't remember exactly, but she was kind of like, "Hey, I've never been to a hockey game. Like, I'm a middle-aged Colombian woman. I've never been to a hockey game. My kids have never been to hockey games. I don't really know anything about this. They're free tickets. Let's go out to a hockey game." And So I went out to a hockey game with my mom and my sister, and I think I remember my sister enjoying it. My sister was always more sports-oriented than I was. I never cared very much at all. And I remember watching that hockey game, and I was more interested in watching the other people around me, like the other people. I almost just said the other people in the audience, but I feel like audience is the wrong term for watching a sports crowd, spectators, etc. Which this all shows you my context. But no, I remember seeing people getting really into it, and I watched it, and I'll be honest, I had a lot of trouble following where the puck was.
Sure.
I remember there being less fighting than I expected. Like, there were some fights, but there was a lot less. That I thought it would just be brawl after brawl after brawl, because, again, all I had were Mighty Ducks movies,
right,
where, those are plot points. So, I mean, it was fine. I don't go for team sports very much. I kind of have this thing where I'm like, anything that has a ball that you just have to chase feels like... And a puck is, in essence, the same thing as a ball in that situation. It's like, ooh, let me follow the ball over here. Let me follow the ball over here. Let me follow the ball over here.
Ray, he's kicked the ball. Now the ball's over there.
It's never been my bag. I've opened up to it a little bit more as I've gotten older. I've been to some soccer games and basketball games since, and it's been fine. It's not something I'm going to sit and watch, but I think more importantly than trying to convert anybody into a hockey fan, it's getting someone to think twice about stereotyping the sport or the fans.
I can get behind that.
I think that's more what you can possibly accomplish with this discussion, because I learned some stuff here.
Well, I'm really glad about that. There's a lot we didn't even get into. The Miracle on Ice, which we prefaced, but that was a huge Cold War victory for the Americans. We didn't talk about the Stanley Cup, which is called the greatest trophy in sports and is really such a bigger deal than winning the Super Bowl trophy or anything like that. There's a lot we've been talking for a while and we didn't really get to touch on, but I like where you're going, and I think I can walk away loving this and having a clearer idea of how to get other people to love it by having them drop those presuppositions and go into it not with certain expectations. So good deal.
Yeah, I really like that. And that's not to say, like, hey, maybe we can revisit it again where one of your loves could be the story of the Miracle on Ice or the Stanley Cup or something like that. That's fine. Like, I'm totally down for that. I say I'm happy to revisit that idea, and we can always refer people back to this conversation. And I know you're a hockey fan. It's in your Twitter everything.
Yep.
Like, so I mean, I'm fine if we revisit hockey. And now I have a better context to talk about it. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to watch any hockey matches anytime soon, but I'm happy to keep talking about it if you're happy to keep talking with me.
Oh, of course, man. So thank you. I enjoyed this.
Absolutely. Me too. You ready to move on?
Absolutely. I'm very excited for your hate.
Yes. I love that sentence. Just, I'm excited for your hate. Like, it's fantastic. So, this is a hate that I feel very, very strongly about because it's been going on for years and years and years and years and years. And it's easy to misunderstand. Anyone who sees the title of this episode might be slightly confused at what I'm titling this. But the thing that I want to put forward in this episode, the thing that I hate, is Nickelback haters. Now, I need to specify, I don't hate Nickelback. I don't love Nickelback. I don't care all that much about Nickelback. They got a couple of songs that I really enjoyed, like 15 years ago, and then I haven't really followed them much since. They've had a few songs that I hated, but I don't really follow them. I don't own any of their albums. Whatever. And so this is not a defense of Nickelback. What I hate is this ridiculous, unearned, lazy meme of people. It's a lazy meme of people who just shit on Nickelback like it gains them entry into some kind of cool kids club.
Okay.
So let me start off. Andy, you've lived as much of your life on the internet as I have. You're as embroiled in online culture as I am. So what's the first like couple of words that come to your mind when you think Nickelback?
Look at this photograph. Over
Perfect,
and
perfect.
over
Okay,
and over
okay.
and over again.
Okay, so you have that. Now, what's the first thing that you think other people think about when they think of Nickelback?
The most by the color by numbers. We're not going to take any risks. Semi blue collar, semi country ish rock band imaginable. The safest rock band imaginable.
I like that answer. Because you know what? It's very true. They are absolutely a band that is guilty of some very generic songwriting at times. I like what you said. They're by the numbers. They're very much, let me check these boxes.
Yeah.
Now, that's obviously worked for them. Some quick background. Since the band formed in 1995, they've sold over 50 million albums. They've been ranked.
1995. Oh my God.
Yeah, they didn't really explode until the early 2000s, but they formed in 95.
Okay, go on.
So they've sold over 50 million albums. They've been ranked the 11th highest selling music act in the world and are the second highest grossing foreign music act in the US after only the Beatles. They've won multiple American Music Awards, Billboard Awards, VMAs, People's Choice Awards, and they've been nominated for both Grammys and Kids' Choice Awards. They've not won any of those two, by the way, but
Sure.
they've been nominated. Now, despite that clear and enduring popularity, the sales, that support, they've gotten consistently mixed reviews from critics. And sometime around the early rise of the internet, it became this weird thing where I started noticing this probably around 2004, 2005. Everyone was just shitting on Nickelback.
Yeah.
And I remember reading I remember first seeing it reading like a random Cracked article. And they were talking about something, and then the person was making a joke about whatever their topic was and was like, yeah, this sucks more than Nickelback. And I was suddenly like, what? Does Nickelback suck? Like, is this... Okay, I guess you don't like Nickelback. But then it started popping up everywhere.
Yeah, meme is the best word for it because it was this infectious groupthink that just sort of infested itself through the internet into the minds of people to, associate this band with just shit.
Yeah. And so you mentioned this, that they do feel very by the numbers, very formulaic. And there's a lot of truth to that. I actually did read in my research here that around 2001 or so, while they were working on their third studio album, Silver Side Up, which everyone remembers, that was the big breakthrough with the Way You Remind Me song. This is how you remind me of her. That one.
That was a very, oh God, what's the guy from Creed?
Scott Stapp.
That was a very Scott Stapp, Chad Kroeger.
With arms wide open. There's an actually quick sidebar story. For one of my birthdays when I was living in New Jersey, we went to a karaoke bar in Philadelphia where they gave us our own private room and everyone was doing karaoke, and I got into it. I love karaoke. And then just to mess with people, and I can't remember if I picked this or if someone picked it for me, but someone put on Nickelback's Photograph, the one you just said, as a spoof, and I got up there, and in that voice, I performed the entire song, every damn lyric. Because I know it.
Sure.
I actually know that song. And I don't know, it's fine. It's like a cute little pop song. I dig it.
Yeah.
But anyway, around 2001, Chad Kroeger, the lead singer, who I think used to be married to or dating Avril Lavigne.
That is correct.
Before she got together with a bunch of hockey players. We tied it together.
Yay.
Kroeger began analyzing current and past radio hits, for whatever musical or thematic cues he could. He got, okay, songs about this, songs that use this kind of chord progressions, songs that use these modalities. And he used those cues. He became an intense student of pop and rock hits. And that informed his style of songwriting. The Way You Remind Me, he talks about it as having these memorable hooks, very specifically, designed to be memorable, designed to stick in your head. The romantic themes, everything he talked about there, it was designed to be a hit. And, people point to that as a criticism of them. They say, oh, they're shitty because they very deliberately write songs to be hits.
It's funny you say that. I was just about to say, I'm enough of an analytics nerd that I didn't know he did that, and now that I do, I can't hate that.
No, you can't. And I mean, the thing of it is, okay, every friggin' person I know who shits on Nickelback for this stuff, with the exception of, my friends who are pretentious indie hipster nerds who only listen to, underground metal and punk, who have their own problems, and that there are some serious problems with that culture. Every single other person I know, if they hate Nickelback, they're still fans of Neil Sedaka from the old Brill Building era. That 60s, Oh, Carol.
Oh, Carol, I am but a fool.
Sure.
Calendar Girl songs. He did the same damn thing. There's a story where Neil Sedaka sat down with the Billboard charts lists and listened to every song of the last 10 years and analyzed them to start writing music. He wrote Oh Carol because he figured out, okay, songs with chord progressions in this key that do this kind of modality interchange, that have a woman's name in them, they tend to do really well. So he wrote Oh Carol, and it's a classic. It is a classic of the 1960s. Right. I'm pretty sure it's in the Great American Songbook. He did the same shit,
Yeah.
Drake does this. Kendrick Lamar just won a Pulitzer for Damn. And Damn is an incredible album. I love Damn. I may talk about Damn as a future love. If you compare Damn to Section 80, which was his underground debut, to Good Kid, Mad City, which was his major label debut, and a really interesting concept album that absolutely, it's 5 years old at this point, certifiably a classic, to Pimp a Butterfly, which was a jazz experiment record, and then Damn, which is another concept album, but Damn is the most commercial album Kendrick Lamar has ever done. He's got a couple of trap hits in there. He's got some really, really great, melodic hooks. And that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Kendrick Lamar understood that in order to keep progressing as an artist and in his success, he had to write more commercially viable music. We just gave Kendrick Lamar a Pulitzer for doing shit that Chad Kroeger has been doing since 2001. And we've been shitting on him for that. I'm not saying Chad Kroeger and Nickelback deserve a Pulitzer. I'm saying it's really, really hypocritical for people to pretend that kind of commercial analysis doesn't matter.
Sure.
And that's reason to write somebody off.
I wonder if the notion that you look at Chad Kroeger and you listen to Nickelback, and both of those things are just kind of instantly easy to hate. Whether like Chad Kroeger has a punchable face.
Sure. Okay. That's
I
fine.
wonder if that wasn't part of how this thing gained so much attention, because you give me an interesting thought. Music itself is such a subjective art form. For something to be truly universally reviled, it has to be really bad. And I can sit here and go, Nickelback isn't really bad. So there had to be something else is kind of where my brain is going with this. And meme culture has exploded along with the internet, so I'm sure that played a big part in it. But you're making some really good points here, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I've got my theories. I feel like I remember at the same time that Nickelback started getting hate, two other bands that I remember receiving a similar amount of hate either at the same time or not long afterwards were Green Day and Fall Out Boy. Now, Green Day had done American Idiot, and you know, since American Idiot has stood the test of time in a really, really interesting way. But I remember when American Idiot came out, a lot of people shitting on it because they were sitting here going, this is not Dookie. This is not Insomniac. This is not Nimrod. These are not these albums that I love and associate with. Why are they doing this weird... What the fuck is Jesus of Suburbia? Like, I don't care. I want the old Green Day. And I remember a lot of people shitting on American Idiot at that time. And, you know, obviously it's made its impact. I consider it one of the great albums of the last 50 years. But I remember a lot of people shitting on Green Day for that because Green Day was taking a risk that didn't work for a lot of people then, and I feel has since come around. I remember Fall Out Boy was just entering the decline of their popularity, like post-2005, when they kind of peaked up. And then you had a lot of people who talked about, like, Filet-O-Deux, and they were upset that Filet-O-Deux wasn't as good as Infinity on High. And Fall Out Boy kind of, like, fell off the map for a bit after that.
They needed to go recoup.
Yeah. And they came back and delivered a really solid album. I think we've talked before...
Save Rock and Roll is
podcast.
My favorite Fall Out Boy album. Absolutely.
It's your favorite. I like it. I admittedly don't like it as much as the old stuff, but I like it. And I'm happy that they're back and that they're working. But a lot of people were shitting on Fall Out Boy hard in that period of time. And it felt like the old boy band hate from the late 2000s. You know, and, you know, even before that, like, I remember Bill Hicks used to have a bit in the early 90s where he, like, joked, quote-unquote joked, about how much he wanted to murder the New Kids on the Block in the same set where he talked about how much he loved Jimi Hendrix, and he's like, Jimi Hendrix was a real artist, and now you have these fucking New Kids on the Block. And that bit, like, for much as I love Bill Hicks, and as much as I love both Jimi Hendrix and New Kids on the Block, and admittedly I love Jimi Hendrix more than New Kids on the Block,
as you should,
I don't think that bit has aged well.
Yeah.
It felt very much like I hate this because it doesn't meet a standard of artistry that I have decided is necessary. But Jimi Hendrix wasn't just writing music that felt good to him. Jimi Hendrix had Eric Burdon of the Animals behind him going like, okay, Jimmy, we need to write, you can do your noodly songs, but we also need to write the radio hits. And that shit worked, and Jimmy cared about it. And the New Kids cared about it. And Nickelback, who, of the three bands I just mentioned, Green Day, Fall Out Boy, and them, Green Day took a risk that was, you know, they had to come back from a little bit and has ultimately paid off. Fall Out Boy reached a natural decline, took some time to recoup as artists, as you put it, and came back. And Nickelback has consistently remained successful in that entire period of time. And I wonder if that has anything to do with why their hate has endured.
I would have to say probably. I was sitting here and I was trying to think, what is a classic rock equivalent to Nickelback? And I'm about to tell you where my brain let me. I'm going to warn you, this may or may not end up in a fight.
Hit me.
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
I don't know if I agree, but I don't think I'd fight about it.
Damn.
But I would ask. No, I like Tom Petty. I never loved Tom Petty.
I think about Tom Petty, and I think about how maybe Bruce Springsteen is also a decent comparison, because what I'm thinking about is...
I will cut you if you go after Bruce Springsteen.
There we go.
Please continue.
No, I'm not going to shit on Springsteen. What I'm drawing a parallel here to is both Bruce Springsteen and Tom Petty. I sort of equate to this Americana classic rock nowadays, but you know, the songs were not the way the songs were written and the style of the song and just sort of the sound. I'm sitting here drawing links in my head between Nickelback and I mean, more Tom Petty than Bruce Springsteen, but a little bit of this just sort of arena rock, love, America, yeah, sort of vibe.
I mean, so is your theory that that those groups, I'm going to focus on Tom Petty so that I don't punch your face next time I see you.
Right.
But the idea that, is there a sellout factor there, or is it like,
sellout's not the right word so much as just a grandiose appeal, because we're sitting here talking about how Nickelback has been successful, and I guess more what I'm saying is that if Nickelback had come about in the 70s, 80s, maybe we're talking about them the same way we talk about Tom Petty. That's where I'm trying to lead us.
okay. So like, I'm hearing, let me posit this. Remember Def Leppard?
Sure.
Okay, so I remember watching a Def Leppard documentary back in the day, and Mutt Lange, who was their longtime producer, they told a story about Mutt Lange talking to them about writing, I want to say it was the writing of Hysteria, which was like their biggest album. I think that was kind of their career peak. Like, it had more hit singles than any other album that they had. But I think I remember Joe Elliott probably talking about how they would regularly, while they were writing songs, their instincts would be to go into these big, again, kind of noodly, technically complex musical compositions.
Yeah. And
Mutt Lange would be right there behind them, just like, guys, you can't be doing this. If you want to play arenas, you need to write music that sounds good in arenas. This isn't jazz, it's rock and roll. Keep it simple, keep like good melodic hooks, big guitars, big sound. And Def Leppard did that, and Def Leppard wrote, like, objectively really great music. Like, I'm a Def Leppard fan, but Def Leppard is a band that does get shat on because they came out at the same time as, like, Judas Priest,
right,
and Iron Maiden, who we look at as having more artistic integrity. Not to say, like, all of those bands have sold tens of millions of albums, but girls like Def Leppard. Def Leppard sells to a broader appeal of people.
Yes, this is where I've been trying to get to. Yeah.
Def Leppard will play in a JCPenney on a Tuesday afternoon.
Right.
That ain't happening with British Steel. Like,
as much as I wish.
I get that.
I think we've tied this. I think we've managed to tie this back into, it's the safety factor. It is the music that is maybe more designed to be enjoyable to more people than music that is a little edgier, has a little bit more of a point of view behind it, but is not going to be as universally accepted. Not to say that Nickelback or Tom Petty or Def Leppard or any of these guys didn't write it with a point of view, but they also were sure, or at least had the thought in mind of, let's write the song that 1,000 people will like instead of a song that 100 people will love.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get that. Now the funny thing there, that I'm going to undercut that same point, is Nickelback will still write a song. Like, doesn't The Way That You Are start with Chad Kroeger being like, I like your pants around your feet?
Yes,
like,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know somebody who lost their virginity to that song. Like, that is a very sexual song.
That's a good point.
The Rockstar song makes a ton of drug references, and that was a huge hit.
Yep.
But I do see that, like, compare those to, what's that? Oh, the one that I really hate, that I heard it and I'm just like, ugh, God, this could be a Chris Daughtry song, and I hate Daughtry. But the one where it's like, I love you, whatever that is, like, I hate that song. I legitimately think that song is the walls of my dentist's office.
Right.
Like, it is so bland and uninteresting. That song is the artistic equivalent of when you go to TJ Maxx and buy artwork.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all by comparison. A song about, like, my first girlfriend, one of my first girlfriends, her favorite song was Animals, which is about banging a chick in the back of her car and her dad catches you. That is the song Animals in a sentence. That song is still a lot less edgier than, let's go to Iron Maiden and do 666, the number of the beast. You know, that's a lot edgier than rescuing my girlfriend from a satanic ritual.
Sure. Now, is it edgier than Poison's Talk Dirty to Me, which is the exact same premise, more or less?
No, not at all. I wonder how many people you could get to say that Poison is the hair metal Nickelback.
You know, I can see
right?
that. I know a lot of people, especially people who are, you know, fans of Guns N' Roses is easy. There are a lot of people who are big fans of Guns N' Roses, even if they're not fans of hair metal. I can think of a number of people who are fans of, say, like Wasp or Motley Crue, but maybe aren't fans of the whole genre. But Poison fan, you're not really going to be a Poison or like a Cinderella fan if you're not into hair metal. Like, if you're not into that subgenre. So, I could see that. I really could. Also, the one other thought that I had about this, as far as just why people are so just pissy about this concept, is I can't remember what it was. I talk so much about music documentaries, but I want to say it was like the seven eras of rock, or something like that. 7 Ages of Rock. I think that was the name of it. It was like a 7-part documentary for probably VH1 or VH1 Classic or whatever. But I remember them talking about alternative, and I remember they talked about like the grunge era, and they started with like the episode. These episodes always went through like the history of the genre, as is like well notated. And I remember that episode like started with the Pixies, REM, moved into like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and there was a very big deal made of how much the post-grunge alternative hard rock bands basically just copped Eddie Vedder's vocals, like his style, and that's where you get Creed and Nickelback and like the band that did, what was that, the Calling song?
If I could, then I would.
Yeah, they're all kind of doing a bad Eddie Vedder impression.
I'll go wherever you will go.
And Chad Kroeger has absolutely like taken that mantle, like 100%. His vocal style is clearly inspired by Eddie Vedder. Now, granted, again, the band formed in '95. I assume it wasn't Kroger's first band. Like, he came into this, probably came by it, honestly. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, like Nickelback, I think there's probably a lot of people who grew up with Pixies or Nirvana or Pearl Jam and really believed in the artistry of that, which is silly because, again, Kurt Cobain wrote songs with a lot of melodies in mind. As much as he got disillusioned later in his life with his career,
Sure.
Eddie Vedder still writes music with an ear towards, he wants to write hits just like anybody else. I think a lot of people view Nickelback maybe as like the death of a certain period for them. Like, they see a guy who sings like Eddie Vedder, guitarists who play like the guys in Alice in Chains some of the time. Which, never mind the fact that Jerry Cantrell is an open and huge Nickelback fan, and every time they play Seattle, Jerry Cantrell goes out on stage with them and plays some Alice in Chains songs. I learned that from that same documentary. He's a big he co-signs Nickelback hard, but I think a lot of people see these musicians, this band doing this, and they feel like it represents some kind of death of something that was really meaningful to them.
I can see that.
And maybe they just latch onto that, maybe it's like when old blues people saw brill building artists like Neil Sedaka, or even Elvis at a certain stage, and went, God, Big Mama Thornton and Robert Johnson died for this. Like,
Sure. It's easy to hate the sellout, but nobody wants to admit that the sellout gets paid.
yeah, I mean, people hate on the money, and it's not that there's not room for criticism there. It's just, to me, people hate on Nickelback not because they care about the music, it's because they want to be in this club of people who hate Nickelback. And the fact of the matter is, they sell this many records, there are at least a few people who are very big Nickelback fans, but don't want to admit it.
Sure.
And that is shitty. That's awful.
No, we don't have time for hypocrisy. I will fight that all the time.
Yeah, so... So basically, I just hate the needless Nickelback hate. I don't defend them. I don't adore them. I don't want to create any false binaries here.
Sure.
I think they're fine. I don't follow them very closely. If some of their songs come on the radio, I won't turn them off. If others of their songs come on the radio, I will turn them off, because that's just kind of how I take that band. They're very much a song-by-song kind of group for me, but I'm really, really tired of people acting like hating on Nickelback gives them any kind of cred, when really it just kind of exposes hypocrisy.
Sure. No, I got no problems with that, man. I think that was a really interesting viewpoint that I personally hadn't considered, and a really cool way to talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, to wrap up, we got time for one question. We always do one question, but...
But today we have time for one.
Yes.
Hold on.
So you brought this question to the table. Do you want to read that, or should I?
I'll read it. Just give me one sec, buddy. Okay. So, yes, I have our question today, and we have a first for Love-Hate Relationship, somebody who actually gave us a call sign.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and so here is the question. Hi there, Love-Hate Relationship. I have a work-related question for you. I work in a very tiny company, and I haven't always gotten along with my coworkers. Recently, my boss, who is also the owner, has taken to writing very passive-aggressive notes whenever he wants something done or thinks I'm not doing a good enough job. I hate the shit out of this tactic, but I'm not sure how to go about talking to my boss about it without causing more problems for myself down the line. What should I do? Thanks, Jim Halpert.
Jim Halpert. Wow. That feels like such an interesting call sign, considering that A Quiet Place just came out, and John Krasinski is like horror movie man all of a sudden.
I didn't even make that connection. I just went straight to The Office.
Yeah, well...
By the way, Quiet Place was awesome.
Okay. I would love to see it. My lady person is not a fan of the horror, but she is a fan of the John Krasinski and especially the Emily Blunt, so who knows? Maybe I can convince her.
I hope you do. I think it's well worth seeing.
Yeah. If not, I'll probably see it on my own.
Yeah.
Okay,
all right,
Jim Halpert.
Jinx.
No. Do you want to spearhead this one, Andy, or should I start?
You go ahead, man.
Okay, so this is obviously delicate. Now, Jim, you did not give us a great amount of detail into what you perceive to be the dynamics of your boss outside of the fact that they are the type of person who feels that passive-aggressive notes are the way to get anything done. So I think that lack of context does make answering this a little tricky, but I'm going to kind of speak in best and worst case scenarios. If there's a best case scenario in this, it's that even though your boss has this passive-aggressive streak, where they don't feel as though they can communicate with you in a clear, open, honest way. If they've shown you any indication that with a little pushback they can be receptive, I think it might be worthwhile to go for it. There is room in discussions like these for a direct approach, for an approach where you look at someone head on and go, okay, I'm an adult, you're an adult. I'm assuming you're both adults. I don't know. You didn't say. If you're working at a tiny company, I assume you're not like a 14-year-old working bagging groceries at the mom and pop store, but maybe I'm wrong. Regardless, you can just kind of say, I want to enter this into a mature way. This is not a productive way to get me to do anything, and see if you can communicate that way. That said, you might not feel that way. And I'm not going to pretend that the world always is as it should be. If this is a boss who honestly you don't feel you can trust with your problems, first and foremost, you got to protect yourself. Find ways to address the issue that will put you in the most minimal amount of harm. If you have an HR person or any kind of intermediate management between you and the owner, see if you can discuss it with them, see if you can pick their brain for strategies, see if you can find ways to address the problem in between that. Alternatively, you might even want to start looking for another gig if you really don't feel like you can successfully do your job in this space with this person.
Yeah.
I don't remember the statistic, but I do know that the vast majority of people, when they leave a job, do report that bad management, and specifically a boss, tends to be the reason.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and say you went exactly where my head was going with the answers to this. You know, I read it and I assume that problems for yourself down the line mean, you know, this said boss being increasingly shitty to you, or even you losing your job. I assume that is the chief concern here with confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
I think trying to talk to an intermediary, especially if it is an HR or some other manager in the company, is a really great idea, and you can sort of have them help you to get your point across, maybe soften the blow, maybe talk to the boss on their own and try to handle the problem without you being in there to be a possibly volatile element. If that is not an option for you, keeping professional, I think, is the way to go here. You know, work is work, and even in a tiny company with not a lot of people, you know, maybe the lines can blur sometimes between worker and friend, but I say lean worker and lean employee boss dynamic. And you know, it's difficult to I'm a very non-confrontational person. It's difficult to sometimes put yourself in your boss's office and talk to him about an issue, but I think that's what you gotta do if you're truly on your own here. And the way to do that is to stay calm and stay professional and really diplomatically lay out the situation. Hey, you've been giving me these notes. The instruction you want me as your employee to do, I feel like would be better received if you were just straightforward about it instead of doing it this way. This is not the most productive way, and I want to be the most productive employee I can to you. Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I am not a trusting person when it comes to workplaces. I've had very, very bad experiences with management in my career, and I've had a number of jobs. I mean, I've only had a couple of jobs that I've had for more than a year at a time. Part of which has been, you know, outside factors, geography, layoffs, etc., things that aren't 100% in my control. But I gotta tell you, like, you mentioned here that you don't always get along with all of your coworkers, and that makes me think that you probably also don't have a lot of avenues of support with other people in this company. And another big issue with small companies tends to be you see this small group of people, you interact exclusively with this small group of people, and if you don't like somebody, they can often make your day-to-day life miserable if for no other reason than the fact that they're in your presence.
Sure.
And if that person has authority over you, if this boss has the ability to make your day-to-day existence just that shitty, I, I mean, I don't necessarily believe you have to enjoy what you do for a living. I'm not a believer in that, you know. I remember Jennifer Aniston's line in Office Space where she's like, I've got news for you. Most people hate their jobs. I think that's true. I think most people hate their jobs. I also do know that, what was it? There was some article or some study that came out recently, not recently, in the last few years, that I felt has been absolutely true of every job I've ever had, which was your happiness in a job is most associated with, I think it's your rewards for good work, like understanding that if you do good work, you're going to see a reward for it. That you have some autonomy over your day-to-day work and how your workflow goes, and then again, the biggest factor, getting along with the people above you.
Yeah.
And if you don't get along with the people above you, your day-to-day is going to suck. So, I don't tend to trust bosses. I don't. If someone that's just me. I hate authority. I've been going to therapy for that shit for years. Like, I have. That's not just me being like, oh, I'm a teenager. I despise like I've taken the personality tests. I've had counselors and mental health professionals go, damn, you have some real problems trusting authority, and I'm sitting here going, no shit. So, if you see this as a minor inconvenience that is just kind of making things harder for you, but it's bearable, I would say find small ways to deal with it, like having a casual conversation about it, or specific criticism might also help. Like, instead of going to your boss and going, hey, you give me a note for every little thing I do and it's bullshitty. Maybe, this is a practical suggestion, maybe if you think your boss would be more receptive to it, maybe going to him, her, they, I kind of want to assume it's a him, but that might not be fair. Maybe going to them and saying, hey, this note that you gave me yesterday about this specific task, it has these 4 things on it. I can handle the 3 of them, but this one point is kind of making things difficult for me. Would it be okay if we made an adjustment with it? Like, getting hyper specific and then broadening it out from there might be a way to kind of slow burn this process and see if you can make some kind of long-term change over the course of a period of time. Like, find the worst parts of this problem, address those first, and see if your boss is receptive to it. If your boss is not receptive to it, if it results in a big problem, really do think that, I mean, I don't want to assume your economic station here. I don't want to assume what you can and cannot do, but minimizing your day-to-day misery at your job is kind of
important.
Kind of a good way. It's a good way to improve your quality of life, because I assume you're full-time here. You're spending 40, maybe 40 plus hours a week dealing with this bullshit. And if that can be 40 hours that are less shitty than more shitty, your overall quality of life is gonna be better. So I would say, if there's no hope of these kinds of actionable things happening, these conversations happening, these getting any kind of intermediary or getting any kind of small changes built up over a period of time, start looking at other jobs. Start the process. That's not to say quit and leave and go do something else. Don't do that. Not telling you to do that. Don't be writing in, Jim Halpert, telling me about how you're doing that. But maybe start looking for something new. You know, this is the American economy right now.
Yeah.
People jump around between jobs. People don't stay places anymore. Like I said, I've been at my current job for a year. It is the and I plan to be here for the foreseeable future. I've already changed positions with the same organization once within that year, which was a good thing. It was a positive, promotionary type of deal. But I haven't had that many gigs that lasted much more than a year or 2 years. And that's just kind of how things are for people these days.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be the worst thing in the world if you start looking for some other new avenues, if this is truly unbearable. If there are ways to make it more bearable, though, pursue them. And pursue them specifically with this boss in the way that will minimize the impact to you as best as possible.
Yeah, I think, we've given you kind of a two-tiered answer here. If this is this is closer to a inconvenience, then just remember to keep cool and not lose your head over addressing it, but do try to address it. If this is a devastating problem, then extraction, might be the long-term best solution.
That is not a defeat. To remove yourself from the situation is not a defeat, and it is not a failure. It is you safeguarding your own work life.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
So in any case, we wish you the best, Jim, and we hope that, everything works out. And I hate passive-aggressive people, so I really hope that one way or another your boss stops doing that.
Hell to the yes.
And that's been our show for this week. So just a reminder, if you have a relationship problem with anyone over anything, and you've decided we, for some reason, are the ones to help you work it out, please send us your questions, and you can send those to lovehaterelationshippodcast@gmail.com, where we promise we'll read them.
You can also tweet us at LHRPod, that's LHRPOD, with your questions, and you can follow us to keep up with new episodes.
Yep. You can follow me personally. I'm Andy Boel on Twitter at JovoCop2113.
And I'm Alex Ruiz, and I'm A_X_RUIZ on both Twitter and Instagram. Thank you all so much for listening, and please, as always, tell your enemies.